Welcome to the second edition of this My Life program with Dr. Charles Williams. We're very pleased to have Dr. Williams with us. He's practiced medicine in our area for 61 years, and he's currently a psychiatrist at the Community Mental Health Center in Lapeer. And when last we talked to each other, Dr. Williams was explaining how you chose the medical profession when you were getting out of high school. But before you get into that, I want to ask you one other thing. I mean, we're talking mid-40s here when you graduated from high school, 1945, right?
Yes.
Through your school career, did your folks focus you on going to college all the time, or what was their approach?
Oh, always. None of my family, in fact, my brother and I are the first college graduates from Leonard, actually. But the real influence on my life was, of course, my older brother Harry, and he was 28 years older than I am, and his children are my age. So basically, we grew up as a close family. That's the only relatives we had in Michigan were my brother, his family, and our family. So all the time we're growing up, of course, it was the older brother never stopped commenting that he needed more education to have advanced. And of course, as my brother said, my younger brother, he says that was drilled into us from the time we can remember. So it was never a question that when we grew up we would go to work and help support the family. It was that we'd go on to college. And one of the fortunate things for both my brother and I was that World War II came along, and so we were the fortunate group that didn't have to worry about going to war and getting killed, but we got the general GI Bill. And the GI Bill, of course, is the only reason I went to medical school. It was just too expensive for me otherwise.
Okay, so you were in the service.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so, yeah, you know, just thinking back, 1945, okay, the war had come to an end, and everybody just had to heave a huge sigh of relief. Everybody, including you students, because it opened up so many opportunities for you, and choice-wise, you knew if you did go in the service, you weren't going to go to war.
Yes.
And you did have the possibility of the GI Bill, or if you didn't want to go in the service, you didn't have to.
Well, when you graduated from high school, the war was still on, but it was winding down.
Right.
Everybody could see that. But they were still drafting, and you had to volunteer if you wanted to go to the service you wanted. Otherwise, you're drafted, you went in the Army.
So what did you do?
Well, I volunteered to be a aviation cadet in the Naval Service, but of course everyone had to have 2 years of college, so immediately they sent us, the V5 people, myself included, to college. And I went first to Central Michigan, then Ann Arbor. And
this was courtesy of the Navy.
The Navy. And some of my classmates did do the last. At the end of the third term, we were given the option of staying or getting out. And I knew that I was going to go back to college, and I wanted to be a physician by then. So I opted out, but some of my friends went on. They had to do one more term, and several of my classmates flew off carriers and that in the Korean War, which came in 1950. But many of us just simply took the opportunity to resign, but we obtained the GI Bill for the 2 years of military service, and I went back to Ann Arbor, and it was different in those days. I paid for my Ann Arbor schooling and saved the GI Bill for medical school. And Ann Arbor was like $80 a term at that time.
It's a little higher than that now.
And, well, you could actually, in a summer, you could earn your tuition. There's 2 terms is $160. So, no, even that was doable. And then I always had a job. I did dishes. I did all kinds of things.
Sure.
I had a particularly good job in which I got the basement apartment with another roommate for cleaning the doctor's office right in Ann Arbor. So I lived in a basement apartment, kept the office clean, so we had a stove, refrigerator, so we had pretty good deal. It was all.
So that's where your medical experience began, cleaning the doctor's office.
Well, it was interesting. One day he says, "Would you come up a minute?" And I said, "Oh, sure." And so I went up, and he says, "I understand you're going to Kirksville this fall." Yes, I have been accepted to both Kirksville and Kansas City. I had 2 acceptances. He says, "Well, that was my school." And I didn't know that.
And those were medical schools, is that right?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
The doctor had gone to Kirksville also.
I see.
He had also gone pretty close to school with my family physician, whom he knew.
Had your folks had any college experience at all?
No, 8th grade education.
8th grade education.
My mother was in high school in Birmingham, and she didn't finish the 12th grade because her mother got ill and she had to stay home and care for her, and then she never went back and finished.
At what point in all this did you meet your wife?
Well, when I was in Kirksville.
It was while you were in medical school?
Yes. My father, of course, was dead, and so we sold the place in Leonard, and my mother and sister moved down to Kirksville with me.
Really?
And we lived in an apartment together. Yeah, it was pretty.
Where's
pretty
Kirksville again?
Missouri.
Okay.
In northern Missouri.
All right.
And so we moved to an apartment there, and of course still use a little bit more money. So at the end of my 2nd year, one of my friends said, "Do you want to work nights as an orderly in the little medical hospital across town?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So he indoctrinated me. I went with him one night, and then they gave me a job. But I worked 2 years as the night orderly with an aide on a medical floor for 2 years at Kirksville, and so earned another couple $100 a month, you know. And
I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but I just want to ask you a simple question. What made you choose the DO approach rather than the MD approach?
Well, I would have gone to either one. In fact, when I was in Ann Arbor, I had a very nice place to live and everything, and I applied to Ann Arbor. But the year that I applied, and there was 100 openings, 24,000 people applied.
My goodness.
And of course, I was one that didn't get it. But my family physician says, "I'll write a recommendation to my school if you're interested." And I said, "Oh, I certainly am." So that's how I happened to be into the osteopathic profession, through my own family doctor in Almont. He was my father and mother's physician. So, and then I remember my father went over and talked to him about it, and he said, "Yes, you'll have a good life," and he encouraged me.
So how did you find medical school? Was that a real eye-opener for you, or?
Well, the first year is always an eye-opener. You get to school, and here's 100 guys that you don't know, all bright people too, and so you're worried about how competitive, and will you be able to make it, and will you be smart enough to grasp all this. And fortunately, the first day, the president of the college came into the classroom, and he said, "Now, gentlemen, I want you to understand, we did not bring you here to flunk you out of medical school. We brought you here to turn you into doctors." And you know, that kind of calmed the whole thing down. But the first year is very difficult. You don't have friends. You're studying somewhat in isolation. But by the 2nd year, God, you're all friends. And it's just as difficult, but you're settled into a routine. It's the first year that's pretty difficult.
Yeah, but then you know each other and you all have the same goals.
We all made it back after the first year. That's the first thing. We're all back.
How many of you were there in your class?
100.
About 100?
We had 2 women and 98 guys.
Okay. Was your wife one of them?
Nope, she's a nurse. She was RN over in the little medical hospital across town. That's where I met her when I was a night orderly over there.
That was where your part-time job was?
Yes.
Okay, tell me how that evolved.
Well, Kirksville is only 10,000 people, so after the first year, you become part of Kirksville. You get to know who lives in the town, you know the townspeople, you kind of become, it's kind of like an oversized Oxford, to say. So after you're there a year, you kind of know the restaurants and the people who runs them and the people in your church and so on. So, and then I was there with my mother and sister, so I lived there the whole 4 years. I didn't just come back and forth every vacation.
I want to pick up on that, but we have to take a break now. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, don't forget you can purchase DVDs of your favorite shows from OCTV, whether it's Minutes by Minute, Our Community Access, or Connie's Kitchen. Just call the station. Our number is 248-628-9658. Enjoy watching all of our shows on OCTV.
Back with Dr. Charles Williams. You were talking to us about being in medical school in Missouri, and working at the hospital across town as an orderly at night, and that's where you met your future wife. Tell me more about the atmosphere in the town then and how that went.
Well, the town had 10,000 people, but it had two colleges. It had the medical school, and it had what's known today as Truman University. And so for the medical school, that was the source of girls, so to speak. And what's interesting is almost all of us that were single, they got to Missouri, almost all came away with a Missouri wife. Well, they were there, and great people, and all educated, and so the two colleges intermixed with their social life to great extent. And the social life at Kirksville was basically the medical school, because it was a little town. They didn't have clubs, it didn't have other entertainments. It was all generated within the school itself, the fraternities and the school itself. And so by the end of the 4 years, you're part of the Kirksville ambience, so to speak. And of course, we met many people that we still know in Kirksville from even as far back as that is.
Yeah.
But so you really became part of the town because the town was small, and you became even more a part of the school and the school systems.
Yeah. Now, something else flared up while you were in medical school, and that was the Korean War. Did that have any impact on your thoughts and what you decided to do?
Oh yeah, that was really a shocker, because I didn't sign up in the reserve when I got out, and many of the men did because they could get a few bucks extra. Sure. And a weekend warrior, so to speak. And the Korean War, if you had a tank MO, that is a tank commander or certain MOs, they came and took you out of medical school. We had men leave for a year. Yes.
But lucky for you, you didn't.
I didn't sign the reserve. Yeah. Well, and many of us didn't, because all we could see was that was interfering, and you know, we're going to move, so you can't do reserve very easily. So I just didn't do it, and many of my classmates didn't either, and many of them had been in service variously. I had men as old as 40 in our class, kind of like the GIs were one group, and the young group that hadn't gone to service were another. So it was like two of them. I happened to be very young, so I was in the younger group and single, and but we had many that had been to service, and they're all GIs. It was, my whole class was GIs.
Did you get married after you got out of medical school, or?
I got married in January, so I knew that there wasn't any babies or obligations till I graduated. So I got married in January and graduated in May.
Okay.
And had the first baby in October.
In October. Let's see.
10 months. I survived the time test, yes.
Okay, so where did you go to practice initially? Well, you had a internship.
First you have to intern, and I went up to Mount Clemens and interned up there.
So you knew right away you wanted to come back to Michigan.
Oh, yeah. And then I went for a year with my family physician in Elmont. And then I worked with Dr. Zimmer and Dr. Dorland in Lapeer, who were surgeons, and they taught me what surgery I know. And I lived in Lapeer 5 years, and then I had a falling out with my partner in Lapeer, and there was kind of scandal involved, so I said I don't want to stay here with that. So I moved down to Lake Orion, which is kind of back home, and I stayed here 25 years. And it was a good experience.
So you were out of medicine, you were out of medical school, and you came to Mount Clemens and started practicing.
No, did a year internship.
As an intern, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that's in the hospital.
Right.
You do a rotation now. You do obstetrics, emergency room, internal medicine. What else did we do? Surgery. Yeah. So we had 4 rotations. Every 3 months you went to a different area. Because when you went out to practice, you're going to do surgery, medicine, obstetrics, orthopedics.
Right.
And in those days, you did all those things. It was only in the 70s that it kind of fractioned it out, so we quit doing.
So when you first got out in the real world, was there anything that hit you over the head as far as practicing medicine goes that you maybe weren't expecting?
No, I thought it was just a great opportunity for me, and I'm sure you can understand this. And I remember when I was growing up, the doctor always had an aura about him that other people didn't have. And at that time, it was just so exhilarating to have joined that club, so to speak, and to have that kind of respect. I was 26 years old, you know,
Sure.
to be a physician, and people treated me as a physician and listened to what I had to say and so on. I often tell the story of getting started is always kind of fun because you're young, no whiskers or anything, and I'm with my general practitioner over in Almont, and I'm not seeing too many people, and I'm kind of chattering with the girls and having coffee and that. And the high school coach brought in a young fellow holding his arm. It was in the fall, so he had an injury in the practice field, and so the other doctor, he's busy, he says, you take care of it. So I x-ray it, and yeah, it was a fracture of the wrist. And so I says, well, let's look at this and get it done, put a little traction on it, click back into place. I said, there, I think we got it. Took an x-ray, yep, casted it up, and on their way. Well, I was born in Leonard, so the coach lived in Leonard. And later, the people over in Leonard said that night down at the gas station, he was in there saying, well, the young doctor knows what he's doing. And so from then on, I was always busy. It was that quick word of mouth.
Isn't that
went around,
something?
so.
Yeah. So what year did you start you started your own practice in Lake Orion, is that correct?
No, I started my own practice in Lapeer.
In Lapeer.
Yep, and I was there 4 years.
And what year would that have been?
From 55 to 59.
And after that you went to Lake Orion?
60.
What made you choose to go to Lake Orion?
Home. It's home.
Just closer to home?
Yep. Yeah, why not? If you're going to pick another place, it's close to home. It was close to the hospital. I still had privileges up there to use, and so it was just handy. Yep.
Okay, were you practicing alone at that time?
Oh yes, and then later I had Dr. Fredericks, and then Dr. Murray was with me 25 years. So.
And with your family, where were you at that? I mean,
we lived in Lapeer at that time.
In Lapeer.
And then we bought the big house. Well, first we bought the house down on South Washington, and it caught fire. And then we lived out on Drainer Road in...
Tell me about that. Your home caught fire. What year was that?
Let's see. Laura was 10 years old. It was in 64.
How many children did you have?
10.
10 kids.
10. And she was the baby, Laura. That's why I was kind of calculating. And what happened is that the people that owned it ahead of time had put a gas heater into the fireplace and then run the gas pipe down and out, and they cut a little hole in the plate that went into the chimney, and then ran it out. But when I came, I took the fire out, and we put fires in, and then the ashes would drop down to the bottom of the chimney. You go down, take that plate up, and scoop them all out. But since they had cut that hole out, an ember got out through that hole and into the basement, and it fired up the house.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. I want to talk more about your family, but we have to take another break, so we'll be right back. Don't go away.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website dogsaver.org and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.
Back with Dr. Charles Williams. We're talking about, we're starting to talk about your family. You're telling us about the house fire you had, and finally after that then you moved into another residence in Oxford, is that right?
Yeah, we bought a house from, it was built in 1910 by Arnold. You know, the Arnolds all live out east of town. But anyway, he built this house in 1910, and then the Goodriches owned it when we bought it. But it wasn't big enough, so I had to lift the third floor, and it's now a 3-floor house with basement. And we had to have the big house because all 13 children lived there at one point.
Wow. Wow.
And in fact, 13 and an exchange student and my wife's father. It was a really full house at one point.
Is that the home you still live in today?
Yes, yes.
But life hasn't always been a bed of roses, has it? You've had your challenges.
Oh, certainly you have challenges, but there's really never been anything that couldn't be overcome. Did lose one grandson to an auto accident. That's always harsh.
How old was your grandson when that happened?
He was 22. He had been working up at the restaurant north of town, and it was raining and dark, and he was cutting across the street to walk home, which is a few blocks, and someone called to him, and I think it distracted him. He turned his head at the same time he walked into the street, and a car was there and hit him.
Oh my!
So it was kind of a nasty. It was my oldest daughter's son, and but that's the only real tragedy so far. My mother, of course, died when in 1962. So those are about the only real tragedies I've had. I think I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, my sister's now dead, but she lived to be 79, and but she's interesting. She had a kidney transplant and had it for 32 years, and she was kind of one of the prizes of Beaumont because it was pretty awesome. You don't live that long usually. And the doctor didn't know why she needed the kidney transplant. What happened to the kidneys? And I says, oh, to my sister, I said, you tell him you had strep throat when you were 2 years old. And when she told the doctor, he says, oh, because after strep infections, your main complications are rheumatic fever, kidney failures, and mastoiditis. And she had the kidney complication. What's interesting is even people that are having the valve replacements now are almost all older people who were born before 1955, which was when penicillin was available to the public. So that meant if you had strep throat before 1955, you had to get over it with your own immunities, that you didn't have the antibiotics. So the cardiac complication is very often scarring of the valves of the heart. So the heart replacements are almost all older people now who had strep throat when they're younger.
Wow.
But then the antibiotics come on, and I haven't seen a case of rheumatic fever in years. I haven't seen a strep throat that isn't treated, and you know that we've really had a marvelous change. In fact, in the 60 years I've been in medicine, the life expectancy has gone up 7 years, which is quite remarkable. They're having trouble getting it to go up more now, but we did get a 7-year increase over the last 50 years.
Wow. So there are some good things happening.
Oh, medicine, sometimes not only in medicine, but also in, you know, we all live here in a time situation. We're not any of us going to get out of the world alive.
We're all terminal.
So the healthcare profession, it really doesn't matter who's in it, our objective all is, can we help you through life as best you can until you do get to the end of life. That's still the obligation of all healthcare workers. Not only physicians, but there's all kinds of people in healthcare, and they all have the same objective.
Are you seeing more problems with young people these days, from a psychiatric standpoint, with the electronics and everything?
Well, I think the biggest thing, economically, they can't get married and form families. If they do, they're disasters. They don't last. They split up. They have very few, in my opinion, adequate employment opportunities. My granddaughter just got married last Friday to a man in Spain. And Spain, I talked to his mother, they have 3 million between 18 and 35 unemployed in Spain, and they're all educated, probably the best educated generation they've ever had to go to work and can't go to work. Now we have the same problem here, just not quite so, the numbers aren't quite so bad, but the youngsters, in my opinion, are faced with tremendous pressures, and as a result of the pressures now we have perhaps behaviors we don't like, the drugs, the partying, they can't get married, they don't form homes, so on.
How can we change that?
Good question. I'm not sure I have all the answers. I always, even in my work at all times, it's number one is always education. You have no way of escaping it without that pathway, but that doesn't guarantee you are going to make it, but at least you have to go that route. I suppose since that was the route I took, and mostly the gratifications that I and my generation have had are the success we have. You know, lots of times people are happy with the family they're in, but Americans aren't that way. They're happy with what they have become. If I'm a successful doctor, I'm a successful engineer, I'm a successful lawyer, I'm a successful businessman, I'm a successful teacher. So it really means that you have your gratifications from what you have become, not necessarily from the family you came from. Now, many of the foreign groups, I'm a Smith, I'm a Jones. That was my family, and they help protect you. But we don't do that in this country. We kind of, you have to make your own way and become successful. And the only pathway I know that's successful at all is the educational one.
Indeed. So how much longer are you going to practice psychiatry?
I gave them my termination date. That was January 1st, 2018. I'm not going to practice when I'm 90.
So you're going to go back home and mow the lawn, are you?
Write my memoirs.
Well, maybe you should. Maybe you should.
I've just been very fortunate. As an older man, I have my medical problems like everyone else, but I've been lucky not to have ones that were crippling and disabling or destroying me.
Indeed.
So.
You mentioned your friend Jim Sherman a while ago. I think I read one place that Jim Sherman told one person, you know, you really need to write your own obituary, so you know what people are going to read.
Yeah, what's going to be put in it.
Yeah, exactly. So what kind of changes have you seen? You lived in Oxford virtually all your life.
Oh, yeah.
What are some of the most surprising things that you've seen about changes in our community over that time?
Well, the traffic through town, of course, is the obvious one. But also, well, when I went to high school, Washington was a two-lane street, and you parked on the street. In fact, you angle parked on the street. My wife hated to have to learn how to parallel park. But anyway, so Washington was a Boward Street. The trees were all over the street, literally, and there were still yards and all of the homes up and down the street. And the business section all was just downtown. As soon as you got out of the first 2 blocks, it was all homes down the street, both sides, both ways. And so obviously you look out there and see, well, that's changes all business, and it's all commercial, and it's tremendously heavy traffic. But one of the teachers from the high school was the mayor after the war, and they decided with the traffic after the war, traffic increased because everybody went to the automobile and was going to live away from the factory. Before that, people lived right around the factory. Used to go to Hamtramck, Dodge Main. They're all Polish and they all worked in the factory. They walked to work or took a streetcar. But then after the war, they moved the factories out and says, well, now you can live where you want. So they all got in the automobile. So Oxford and Orion ended up with this exact problem. Before the war, there was 2 little towns 50 miles out of Detroit. But after the war, the city grew right out and became part of the war, or of the city. And so now we have become part of the city. And today, and I often tell people when I was in high school, Vern Schoaf was the part-time police officer, one. And he was part-time. If you had a problem, you call him and he'd come in his own car. But then after the war, Gene Meager started the subdivision out on West Burdick on Tan Lake. When I was a kid, there was nothing but cows on Tan Lake. There was all pasture land. But he put the first subdivision, and of course it's grown from there.
I like to ask all my guests this question when we conclude our interview. If you had the opportunity to live your life again, would you make any changes?
Oh, you always go back and look at your errors and think, oh, I'd do this thing. But the overall, no, the medicine profession was an absolute great choice. And the psychiatry, and I remember my partner was shocked when I decided I was going to do the psychiatry one. But it was a great choice. I can do it in my old age, and it's worked out well, and it's been fairly successful. Well, nobody's fired me yet.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your presence on our program. Dr. Charles Williams, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Hey Leonard, you're watching OCTV.